Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for an exciting episode. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Welcome. You're going to enjoy it. And if you are a returning listener, well, thank you for coming back. Be sure to leave us an honest rating and review so we can hear more about it, what you love about the show, and anything we can do to make the show better, like bringing on today's guest. We've heard some of you guys want to learn more about marketing, especially email marketing. So I tapped today's guest, Mr. Chase Dimond. Chase Dimond is currently a partner at Structured, a top e-commerce marketing agency where he runs the email team. Since 2018, he's helped his clients send over 1 billion emails, resulting in over $50 million in email attributable revenue. What an amazing accomplishment. Now, some of their clients include Orgain, The Chive, Original Grain, and CrossNet. Let's welcome to the show, Chase Dimond.
Hey, man, how are you?
I am doing great. Chase, thank you for coming on the show. Great info on your bio. I went over it at a high level, though. Can you take a minute or two and give us a little bit more context?
Yeah, so I'll make this quick. 13 years old, diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Basically spent an entire year being sick through lack of awareness of this disease, kept getting misdiagnoses after misdiagnoses. At the age of 14, I took it upon myself to raise awareness and fundraising for this disease. So from 14 to 16 years old, I dedicated my lives to learning marketing, raising awareness, raising funds in the community. And at 16, I became the youngest board member of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They do about $50 million a year in funding for Crohn's and colitis disease. Those diseases are basically inflammation of your digestive tract, inflammation of your colon. And there's about 1 to 2 million people in the US that are diagnosed with this disease. So I basically did that in college. I played college soccer. I was in fraternities, sports, all these types of things. And I also had to work 6, 8, 10 different jobs and internships to pay my way through college. My parents couldn't afford to send me where I went, so I had to help kind of step up and pay. And really in college, I found my love of marketing and starting businesses. After I graduated, had a couple of cool businesses that I worked for. One was an ed tech platform that ended up selling to Barnes & Noble for about $60 million. And basically when I was there, I built a platform that connected students on college campuses with others in their classroom to make learning more collaborative. I then went on to start an email travel series called The Discoverer, where basically we inspire people to travel the world straight from their inbox. Scaled that from 0 to 500,000 subscribers in 10 months. And then had a couple of different businesses. I had a dating site that went viral. We had millions of hits. We were on like Ellen DeGeneres, Stephen Colbert. I had an Instagram software for musicians that got acquired. And last but not least, I've been working on an e-commerce agency specifically focused on email marketing for the past 3 or so years.
So you haven't done anything really, is what you're telling me.
I still have a lot more I want to do.
Chase, listen, man, amazing background there. I love hearing about, your story and just really the thing that sparked you, having the health issues with the Crohn's disease, finally getting the diagnosis correct, and then dedicating the next couple of years of your life to really helping other people gain the awareness necessary, and just how that really took you down a path of recognizing the importance of marketing. And I think that's key because I think there are a lot of people who have a misconception of marketing, right? And see it as kind of like trickster sales or misleading people. And it's really a megaphone, right? It's really a megaphone to amplify your voice, whatever it is that you're doing. But how do you approach marketing? Maybe you can give us some more context.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. I think for me, the fact that I got into marketing, it was never to make money, right? It was to raise money and it was raise awareness, but it never was for me to make money, right? So I wasn't trying to do this get rich quick type of thing. I really got into it with authentic and kind of genuine intentions. And I think that experience really set up how I viewed marketing. My whole focus now and really what I spent a lot of my career doing after college is how do I build communities that connect people, and how do we connect people around content that's helpful, impactful, insightful, right? How do we people to learn, how to get people to better themselves through knowledge, through information, through connections, right? But I think just the background of starting from that, I think it probably would have been different if I had started and I was trying to make money to do something. But because I had like these organic roots, that's really set the foundation of like, how do we inspire people through our copy? How do we, motivate people through our design? So there's a lot of like psychology and design and copy and making people happy with the end result, right? It's a two-way street. We benefit because there's some kind of monetization on our end, and the consumer, the user benefits because they get knowledge, they get value and whatnot. So I think that two-way street and that mutual exchange of value is really what I put emphasis on.
Yeah, Chase, I really like the way you talked about building community. And, one of the things that is so important for every entrepreneur is to find that audience, right? Connect with that community, build that community. And we're seeing right now, I mean, social media is an amazing way to engage with people. But the one downside is you don't necessarily own that platform. And I saw you actually made a post about this earlier in the week, but I would love to first talk about building community and then talk about why it's important to build it in a way where you actually can control the interaction.
Yeah. So in terms of building community, right? Like typically when you're building communities, it's a group of people that have a shared interest, right? So when you can align with that first thing, it's really powerful. When people can buy into the community, whether that's buying your products, buying your services, joining a free Facebook group, joining a free forum, right? People are all congregating around topics and ideas that are meaningful or impactful or serve some, need, whether that need is something short-term, mid-term, or long-term. So I think really at the core and the roots, starting something that you are genuinely passionate about as the business owner or the entrepreneur, and allowing others to really carry on in those vision and that dream and be a part of the community, I think is so important. So for example, we do a lot of e-commerce, right? That's really where we're centered. That's where we're focused. Every single time one of our consumers buys from one of our brands, we are always sending an email from the founder or spokesperson or community person. It's plain text. It just feels like a personal email about what it means to us and what it means to the business and what it means to our team. And especially through the tough times that a lot of people went through over the past year and a half, however long it's been, being able to say thank you and express the gratitude and just share, very, visibly like what that's done for our company and our families and the families that work for us. I think just opening up the layer and pulling back like what is going on and what's real and not being afraid and not wanting to try to hide things. I think that is where the community really lives. People are so good at sniffing out the BS, right? If you're not authentic, if you're just in it for, the wrong reasons, people will eventually figure that out and it'll catch up to you. So I think the secret, right? And there's not really a secret, but the secret is approach it from a good nature, be a good person, be helpful and serve others.
Yeah, great tips there on building community, really coming from an authentic place, serving other people, helping them get what they want. And, as I'm thinking about the different communities that exist, I mean, you talked about the e-commerce space. I'm certainly involved in a bunch of real estate communities. And, these can be digital communities. They could be physical, groups, that meetups and things like that. But these communities live across different spectrums. Bigger Pockets is a website that I know a lot of real estate investors go to. There's a big community there. There's different Facebook groups. There's a lot of different platforms, right? So there's Twitter, Reddit. There's a lot of different places to congregate when you are looking at community. If there's an entrepreneur who's looking to, build a community or even just join an existing community, how do you navigate that? Or what are your suggestions to navigate to find or start your own community?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll answer this in two ways. The first is I'll answer it kind of from like what I do, and then I'll answer it like what I think others should do. So for me, right, like I have three different mechanisms of how I like to reach people. One is through the written word, and I think of things like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, right? Typically it's words, right? Sometimes it's video, sometimes it's photos. But I want to connect with people where they can just read and kind of passively or actively consume my content. The other is I produce a lot of video content, whether it's webinars, YouTube videos, even interviews like this, right? Where people can watch me, right? And for those that are watching in the back of my screen, or those who are listening that can't watch me, the back of me, I have this sign that says Ecom Chase. I've got photos of my family, right? So when I connect with people on video that have watched my content, they feel like they know me, right? There's this level of comfort and they're like, oh, I've seen that sign in the background. I never knew that was real. It's like, well, yeah, actually here it is. So I want people to see me, right? When they can listen to me and consume my content, visually, that's really important. And then the last one is kind of like people listening. I started my own podcast. You have your podcast. People that are driving, people that are going to the gym, people that are on a walk can consume this content. So for me personally, when I think about content creation, I think about the mechanisms in which someone will actually consume the content. and I want to own all of the mediums. Someone could read my stuff, someone can watch me, and someone can listen. And every single day, there's a different opportunity for someone to do hopefully one, if not two or three of those things. So that's how I think about it. In terms of someone else, I think depending on the vertical or the industry that you're in will dictate what platforms you're on, right? There's probably different platforms, like you mentioned, was it Bigger Pockets?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's probably a social network or some component within that people can go connect on. And that might be better for the people listening than going on Twitter for someone in marketing or whatever the space is. So I think each vertical or niche or each goal dictates, where people would be. I personally really like a few platforms. I really like Twitter. The reason I like Twitter is because there's still a lot of organic reach. And what I mean is, John, we're connected on Twitter. If you like or comment or retweet my thing, your network's then going to see it, right? We have this organic network effect, this reach. I have, I think, about 20,000 followers, but I get 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, even sometimes hundreds of thousands of people reading my things on Twitter because of that, which is great. Whereas with something like Facebook, I have unlimited to 5,000 friends that follow me. At most, I can only have 5,000 people that see it. And far often, it's a lot less, right? My engagement and my reach on Twitter versus Facebook are way different. On LinkedIn's a great platform as well. Its reach is more similar to Twitter than Facebook. On LinkedIn, by someone liking and commenting and engaging with your content, that opens up their network. So I really like to produce content on platforms that reward creators, and they reward creators through reach. The more people that see my content, the more people that can work with me, more people that can listen to my stuff, the more people that can buy my stuff. And the last platform that I really like is YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. Most people don't think about it like that. Most people think about Google, Yahoo, etc., Bing, and whatnot. But I really like YouTube because the longevity of the content. I could create a video today with you right now that people will watch today. If it goes published, they'll watch it in a week. They might even watch it in a couple months or a couple years. So for people listening, depending on where goals, I think Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn are great platforms because of the reach.
Yeah, excellent tips right there. You talked about for yourself, you're looking at the written word, kind of visual, and then audio as really the three mechanisms of how you like to communicate. And for our listeners, our entrepreneurs, our investors who are looking to grow their businesses, you talked about really looking at, platforms like Twitter for the organic reach that they have, looking at Instagram for the ability to reach out, and platforms that reward creators, right? People who are actually taking the time to create great content, you get rewarded by expanding. The limitation with Facebook, as good as it is as a platform to engage with friends and family, is really hard to get one, organic reach, but then two, it doesn't necessarily reward creators. They want you to pay for that. So it's really difficult to get in front of a bigger audience. So just something to keep in mind as you look at it, the content that you're building. We talked a little about your main business, right? Let's talk a little bit more about e-commerce. So you've created a ton of different companies, right? You kind of rattled through many of the ones that you've built, the sites that you've built and designed. For that average person who is not really a designer, tech quite isn't their thing. Maybe they have a day job, but they recognize that, hey, there's an opportunity to add e-commerce to my income stream. How should they go about approaching e-commerce as a whole?
Yeah, so there's three ways that you could get involved with e-commerce. I'll kind of quickly talk through the three, and then any one that you want to drill in, let me know. So there's e-commerce brands, right? I think that's probably the most obvious. You could go start an e-commerce brand. It's easy and challenging, right? There's things that are going to be easy. There's also things that are going to be challenging. Things that become challenging are like, where do you source the product? Having MOQs, having to have a warehouse, fulfillment, shipping, logistics. Those things are often pretty hard. Product development, right? The easy things, if you're a marketer, right, are probably like creating the website on Shopify. It's pretty easy to do, and kind of coming up with the assets or the creative, the copy, and the marketing. So the e-commerce brand, I think that's a great opportunity, but there's also barriers to entry there, where I think the other two that I'm about to talk about have less barriers to entry. And those are two, building an agency, and three, becoming a freelancer. And those are pretty similar in a lot of ways. The difference is, right, as a freelancer, you're typically a one person show. You're a one-man band. You're working with clients. And you're typically specializing in a specific thing: email copywriting, Facebook ads, email design, website design, CRO, which is conversion rate optimization. Where on the agency, right, like you're trying to build a team, you're trying to scale past just one person. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of low-hanging fruit, and there's really no friction to starting an agency or freelancer. You basically hit your network up, you send cold emails, It's very cheap and it's very quick to start. So if people are listening, want to get into e-commerce, I think the easiest and quickest way is to start a service business. Start doing, an email marketing agency, start doing a paid Facebook agency, start doing, freelance. And then from there, get clients, figure out, do you like the service side of the business or do you actually want to start the e-commerce business? And if you do the service side first, so at my agency, we have 4 different departments. We have about 50 to 60 employees. And we work with about 100 clients. So of the 100 clients we work with, brands do at minimum $1 million a year. And we have brands that are doing, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, a couple hundred million, right? Public companies, private companies, et cetera. And the best part about that is I got to see what works on a micro and a macro level across 100 different brands in dozens of countries. We've got a lot of people here, in the States, and we've got a lot of people overseas, London, Canada, Mexico, places in Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So I get to see trends that are happening in real time through the e-commerce industry, and also within verticals of what's happening right now in, beauty, what's happening in skincare and hair care, what's happening in cannabis and CBD, what's happening in fashion and apparel, right? And those insights, inform my decisions across the board. What stock should I be investing in, right? Like if I see some of my brands that are all private codes that I can't invest into on the private sector exploding, maybe that's a bigger conversation around like what public companies that I don't have anything to do with and I just know of are going to be exploding next if they adopt e-commerce, right? For us internally, we're planning on building out our own internal e-commerce brands and our own software and tools. Where should we look to do it? What companies are scaling? Where are the best margins, right? Like there is an endless amount of data that I have access to by starting an agency and working with so many different companies of so many different sizes. So that's really interesting to me.
That sounds great, but it also sounds like overwhelming, right? I mean, I used to work at a real agency, right? A real meaning a physical, but I used to work at an agency and be in the agency world, and the e-commerce approach is so intriguing to me. But as I listened to you, I mean, the thoughts were, well, where do I find clients and where do I find staffing and how do we manage communication? And there seems to be a lot of layers in that. And I know obviously over time you've built it out, but for someone who's listening and says, hey, that does sound intriguing, I wonder if I can start. I know you've got some information available, so maybe you could share one. What's the very first step? And then what's a good way for them to find you and continue that conversation?
Yeah, people probably won't like this answer, but go get a job. Like go work for an agency, right? Like go work for, another freelancer and shadow them. Like again, everyone listening wants to be their own boss. They want to be entrepreneurs, but like I spent many, many years working for other people before I ventured out on my own. Go work for an agency, learn what happens, learn the process, learn how to get clients, right? Spend 6 months, a year, 18 months there, however long it takes. And while you're still working there, try to get clients. Don't obviously poach your own agency's clients. That's not something I'd recommend, but try to find other clients, right? Like find clients that are similar or complementary where you can leverage your skill set and your kind of case studies around that current agency, and then build up your book of business. Spend nights and weekends working on these side clients. And as soon as the side clients make just as much, if not more money than your full-time job pays, make the migration towards being your own boss. Like really, like that's the longer answer. That's the way I think to do it correct. Don't get me wrong. If someone wants to do it and they're hungry, they can go learn and do it themselves. But take out the guesswork. Go work for someone that is established. Go work for someone that has a good reputation, and then leverage the learnings and leverage your reputation there to do your own thing.
Yeah, and I think too, it's interesting because when people think of, well, I'll speak for myself. When I think of e-commerce, I typically think of, like you mentioned, the brands or selling something online, whether it be a digital asset like an ebook or physical assets that are being shipped. And you mentioned MOQs and a couple other terms I was not familiar with. But I think a lot of people hear e-commerce and they think that right away, not necessarily building like an agency or freelancing their services. And it doesn't even have to just be marketing, but accounting and other corporate skills that many of our listeners have that they can actually utilize in the digital space to expand their brand, to expand their reach, and to get higher paying clients to cover their expenses.
Yeah, marketing is very much the lens in which I see things. But to your point, right, I think other opportunities within e-commerce are 3PLs, right? If you do, if you have a warehouse, if you do logistics and shipping for other verticals or industry, I think expanding into doing it for e-commerce makes a lot of sense. I think that's one. Also to your point, like I have had a really hard time finding good accounting and finance people within e-commerce. It's just not something that's there. So I think that's also really interesting. I think there's opportunity for people that do have capital to put together, a syndicate or an angel fund or something to invest and acquire or buy some of these e-commerce businesses, these agencies, even some of the software, right? Like you think about Shopify and you think about Klaviyo and MailChimp and a lot of these softwares, obviously those are, billion-dollar and multi-billion-dollar companies, right? So those wouldn't be the right buyers, but there's a lot of software too. Like if you think about the gold rush, right? There's the people that were trying to mine the gold and there's the people that were selling the tools that help facilitate that, right? You could also be on the technology side that enables brands and agencies to do their workflow. So I think there's a lot of interesting opportunity. And I think we're starting to see the early wave of PE, which, private equity, venture capital coming in and rolling companies up, right? Like, can I go buy 5 agencies that have $1 million each of EBITDA? Can I roll those up? Can I try to go from $5 million in EBITDA to $10 million? And then can I go package that and sell that to someone else and make some good money? So I think there's a lot of really interesting things that we're seeing too, which I think is probably maybe even more in line with some of your audience is like, the finance side, the acquisition side, those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Chase, I think there's a lot of great information here. You've got a podcast that gets into kind of e-commerce a little bit more, and I want to make sure we plug that real quick because it's a great show if you really want to learn more about what Chase was talking about. It's called the Ecommerce Opportunity, and it is available wherever you're checking out this show. So make sure you check that out, the Ecommerce Opportunity. I want to switch gears a little bit here. We've talked a little bit about e-commerce and your background building all these sites. I know one of the things that's helped you be very successful is email marketing. And in fact, in your bio, I read that you sent over 1 billion emails that has resulted in over $50 million of revenue. Let's talk email marketing at a high level. One, let's just define it. So we're all playing, reading the same thing here and thinking about the same thing. What exactly is email marketing? And then we'll dive into some of the other questions.
Yeah, I think at the simplest and at its core, right? So if we all send emails, right? We all have email addresses. Just like you send an email one-to-one. So John, I have your email. I'm trying to hit you up about some new product or service that I have. I think you're interested in. We know each other, right? So you're going to probably want to, at the very least, just have a sense of what I'm working on so you know. Think about that same thing, but doing it one-to-many. So there's tools out there that automate sending to list or segments. So a list basically is a static thing. So people sign up to your thing, that's a list. And then there's segments within the list. And segments basically are breaking people into groups based off of the things that you know about them or their interests or their behaviors. So within e-commerce, a segment of people might be, hey, these people have purchased, this product, or these people have bought from our store in the past 30 days. Whereas the list is everyone, right? So again, e-commerce is basically taking a list or a segment, sending it out in one go, but wanting to do it in a way that feels personal, right? The great thing I love about email, kind of compared to other channels, is this. Email is very intimate. It's one-to-one, even though it's one-to-many. And what I mean by this is if you think about your Facebook feed, your LinkedIn feed, your Instagram feed, there's ads, right? But also on there's posts from your boyfriend, your wife, your mom, your ex, your coworkers, right? There's a lot of distractions. Don't get me wrong, Facebook and all these platforms are very necessary and they're very important. But when you have all these other things, all this clutter going on, it's pretty easy sometimes to tone out the ads. Whereas with email, even though I'm sending it to 1,000 people, 100,000 people, 1 million people, I can do it in a way that feels one-to-one and it's intimate. John, if I get you to open my email, depending on how good my copy and my design is, I have your undivided attention for 1 second, for 30 seconds, for a couple of minutes, right? And it's just me and you. Sure, you have your Slack open and you have all the people yelling at you, right? You're working from home. You got your kids yelling at you, your wife yelling at you, whoever it might be. But emails, it's me and you. And that's what I really like is the fact that I could hit 100,000 people. And if I do a good job, it feels like it's just for them.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I like the way you just described it, because we have all these distractions, so many things going on while you're going through the feed. But with email, it is more personal because it's a one-to-one interaction. On the flip side, I know I get a ton of emails, right? So there are people who get a lot of emails, and the effectiveness may be questionable for some people, and maybe that's due to copy and things like that we'll talk about. But people hit delete, you can get into the spam folder. So when you look at the challenges of email marketing, how do you factor that in? When you look at, okay, yeah, but you're going to get some in spam, you're going to get some that are flagged, you're going to get some unsubscribe emails. How do you factor those things in?
Yeah, look, I'm extremely bullish on email. Every single channel, email included, has its pros and cons. Right, some cons of email, to your point, might be that people get overloaded with emails. Your email's not get read. They might go to the spam. Someone might open it and mark it as spam or unsubscribe. Right, like there's a lot of things that could go wrong. But I think there's more things that could go right. And the thing is, that's great about your list is, say you have 10,000 people on your list, you'll pay your ESP, which stands for your email service provider. That's things like MailChimp, Klaviyo, so on, ActiveCampaign. You pay them typically a monthly fee based off the number of people on your list, right? So it's a one-time fee. If you email them one time, it's the same fee. If you email them 10 times, it's the same fee, right? Whereas with Facebook, every single time you want to reach 10,000 people, you have to put money in, right? And hopefully you get the money out. So what I like about email is the fact that it's very predictable. You know what your costs are going to be. You also, to some degree of certainty, can have a sense of what your open rates are going to be, what your click-through rates are going to be, what your conversion rate is going to be. Whereas with top of the funnel, you're kind of just, you're throwing a line into the pond and you're hoping some fish bite, right? And again, email in the beginning maybe is like that until you know what works. But once you know what works, it's rinse and repeat. I put in my bio that I've done over $50 million in email revenue. My team makes fun of me. I haven't updated that in probably 6 or 12 months. We're probably doing at this point $5 to $10 million a month in email revenue. It's just one of these things, like, I don't want to have to go update all my bios everywhere on every platform. And I think our number is probably closer to like 100 or 200 million. And the larger it is, the less likely that people like actually believe it. So I've purposely kept it at 50 million, even though we've done well north of that. So the point there, long-winded, is like, we're doing about $5 to $10 million a month for our clients via email revenue alone. It's typically accounting for about 20 to 30% of our e-commerce brand's total revenue. So for every $100,000 that our brands are doing every month, it typically accounts for 20 to 30,000. And again, we're working with brands that are doing $10 million a year, right? So for them, they're driving $2 to $3 million a year for this. So just think about the magnitude and the scale of how big this could get as your business matures.
And I think in particular, if you are a real estate investor, this is really important because we don't have the ability to have a product available like that, right? It's not that. So where it's more about the relationships, it's more about the long term, it's more about making sure you can reach people when it's right for them. And email marketing is just a phenomenal tool to kind of stay in touch with people. Now, there's some pros and cons and some best practices. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the best practices, because one of the first steps is to actually get someone to read your email, right? So talk to us about some of the best practices to actually get your emails open and get people to read it.
Awesome. I promise to talk about that one second, but to your point, I just want to double down on it. So for me, I have a weekly newsletter. I think having a weekly newsletter or some kind of cadence that people know up front is really important. So whether that's even monthly, right? It's better to start, with less and then scale up. So if for anyone's listening that has a list of people that have given consent or opted in to hear from you, even start with like a monthly newsletter. And then if you have time and if there's good response, increase it to bi-weekly and then increase to weekly. And to your point, I think the best thing and the hardest part about real estate is staying top of mind, right? There's so many other real estate agents. There's so many people that want to compete for deals. If you could stay top of mind, that is the number one thing, right? And how do you stay top of mind? It's by creating content on social media, creating podcasts, creating videos, and doing newsletters. So for me, I have a weekly newsletter every single Monday. I'm in people's inbox sending my email marketing content. Anytime that someone has an email marketing question, anytime that anyone has an email marketing need, anytime that someone wants an email marketing course, anytime that someone wants to hire an email agency, you better believe I'm top of mind, right? Everything I do is staying top of mind. So I think that is the benefit of a newsletter for people that are listening, is it allows you to stay top of mind. They see you as the expert, right? They remember you, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, and it will turn into deals. Will it turn into a deal tomorrow? Questionable. Will it turn into a deal in a month? Questionable. Will it turn into a deal in 3, 6, 9, 12 months? 100%. Someone is going to buy it. You will get at least one deal if you're consistent with it. The size of that deal depends, right? Will you get more deals? Maybe. So that's really what I want to double down on. So, but to answer your question, the very first step of email is getting people.
Actually, before you even answer my question, now you said something so great. I want to come back to that one now. We'll come back to the other question. Frequency is a question I get from everyone. I always hear this from everyone when it comes to email marketing. It's, how do I determine the frequency of the emails. And you talked about, starting maybe at least once a month and kind of ramping up from there. And the fear for many people is that if I send too many emails, people are going to start to unsubscribe from my list. Can you just maybe weigh in on that?
Yeah. So for one, it starts before people even join your list, right? Before people even get on your list, you have to set the expectation. If you're going to send a daily email, you have to tell people you're going to send a daily email. Otherwise, people don't assume that that's the case. I think when most people subscribe to a list, they assume that they're going to probably hear a handful of times a week at most, right? A handful could depend on, 1, 2, 3, potentially 4 times a week is probably the upper threshold if you don't specify like of what people could expect. So I think setting the expectation up front is really important. So that way you're on the same page. That's one. And then two, it's going to sound really simple, and it actually really is. Start by sending, if you're going to do a weekly email, send one email per week. And you're going to want to monitor a few things. There's going to be positive things you're going to want to look at, and there's going to be negative things you want to look at. The positive things are things like open rates. So how many people are opening your email? The other positive things are going to be how many people are clicking your email. If you're in e-commerce, how many people are converting on your email, right? So you send an email out. Did 5 people buy from it? Did 10 people buy? Did 1,000 people buy, right? Like, what is your conversion rate and how much money did that email drive? Those are all great things. On the flip side, you're going to want to monitor negative things. Those are things like marked as spam, emails have bounced, people have unsubscribed. And if things are in line with the industry standard, and all those metrics are probably pretty easy to find online, I'll kind of quickly go through them. You want to get a 20% open rate or higher on a campaign. And a campaign is a one-time send to a group of contacts. Think some kind of real estate announcement or some kind of holiday wishes, whatever that might be. You want to get a 20% open rate, right? So if you send to 100 people, you want to make sure at least 20% or 20 people open that email. Click through will really depend on what the goal of the email is. So it's hard to give a metric there. But in terms of the marked as spam, you're allowed to have 1 out of 1,000 people marking as spam. Anything over that, right, is alarming. So 1 out of 1,000 people are technically allowed to mark you as spam, right? 0 is amazing. And then on the unsubscribe, you want to have typically about 0.5% or less. So, right. So out of every 100 people, 1 people or less, let's just say, will unsubscribe. Balances, right? You want to keep those typically under 1 or 2%. So you want to monitor those metrics. If those metrics all look healthy, they all look in line, send a second email per week. Great. All those metrics look good. Send a third email per week. Maybe that third email is where you see friction. The open rates decrease, the engagement, meaning basically the people that click, have decreased, and then the negative things have increased, right? Those things increasing is bad. If more people mark as spam, if more people unsubscribe, if more people bounce, those are bad, right? So then you know that the way to maximize revenue and minimize churn is by sending 2 per week. Every single company has a different threshold of how many emails they can get away with. A company that someone loves and buys product from that has a lot of SKUs, that creates really interesting content, is featuring their community, they might be able to get away sending 4 or 5 times. If you're a single product SKU, or if you're a real estate advisor, investor, agent, and you don't have really anything interesting to say and you send 4 times per week, you're probably going to annoy people, right? Like, you don't have things to say 4 times a week. Don't do it. You probably really only have 1, maybe 2 things a week to say. So that's how I think about frequency.
That's great. I love that. And I love the fact that you talked about you're going to have to monitor the results and what to look for, what to look for from a positive standpoint and what to look for from a negative standpoint. And your mileage may vary. As you get into this, you may see that, hey, 1 weekly email is great, or bi-weekly, or 3 a week are great. But you have to kind of measure it. And the point really is, it's not that it's free, but as you said, you're paying the service provider once a month. So it's a tool. It's like running a commercial on TV, right? If you have the spot ready, you have to pay the the time slot. But if you didn't have to pay the time slot, would you run your commercial over and over and over? Of course you would, until you got burnout, right? Where it said, hey, I'm tired of seeing this commercial. And there's a bad side to it, right? So the email marketing is a similar thing. It does take creative, right? You got to come up with the content. You've got to keep it interesting and fun, but it's a way for you to engage with people that doesn't really cost you any extra money. So it's definitely a tool that you should be using in your tool belt. All right. The original question I asked was how to get people to actually open and read your email. So I'll let you answer that one now.
Yeah. So again, it starts with getting people on the list. The way that you get people on your list is a couple ways. There's typically this thing called a pop-up. Most of us probably have experienced it on e-commerce site. It kind of takes over the center of the screen. Sometimes it takes over the whole screen. It says, hey, John, enter your email for free shipping, or hey, Chase, enter your email for 10% off, or enter your email to be the first to know about X, Y, and Z, right? that's one way in which you get people on your list through some kind of offer or incentive. And there's basically the same type of thing, but there's a flyout. It's a little bit less obtrusive. It just scrolls out from the bottom right hand of your corner. It's just a small little banner that just says, hey, enter your email, whatever it might be. And the last thing is called an embedded subscription form. Those typically live at the bottom of your website. That says, enter your email, whatever. Those also live sometimes within blog posts. So that's step one, is getting people on your list. If you're in e-commerce, when people make a purchase, they'll also end up on your list. That's one. And then the next step is, how do you get people to open? So the three most important variables to get people to open, aside from where your email lands, right? There's the primary inbox, there's the promotions, and there's the spam. So outside of where you land, obviously, if you're in the spam, you're going to have 1%, 3%, 5% open rates. It's going to be pretty bad. If you're in the promotions or the inbox, it will vary. The promotions, you're probably looking at, I don't know, maybe anywhere from like 15 to maybe 25% of people potentially opening your emails if you're hitting the right segments. And if you hit the inbox, you could be getting 20, 30, 40, 50%, right? Depending on the segment that you hit. So that's where you land. That's obviously important. But the three variables that you control is the from name. So for me, it would be from Chase Dimond. From you, it would be from John, or from John, your last name. The next thing would be the subject line, right? So, if you invited me on this podcast, John, and we didn't know each other, it could be from John. The subject line could be, top real estate podcast. And then there would be the preview text, which is the text right next to it on the right that shows you a little snippet of what's about to happen. So it's from John, it's a top real estate podcast. And then it could be something like, hey, Chase, wanted to invite you on my top real estate podcast, right? So those things all work hand in hand to get me to open it. If I'm in real estate or if I'm in marketing and you're telling me you're a top podcast, I'm probably going to want to open that, right? I'm going to want to see at the very least, like, what you're about. If I think you're legit, which I do, and that's why I'm here, I'm going to reply or book something. If I don't think you're legit and I think you're full of, shit, then I'm going to just mark a spam or delete or tell you, hey, unsubscribe me, right? So again, those are the three variables that you control. It's the from name, the subject line, and the preview text. And the preview text basically is a second subject line.
Excellent, man. So control the from, the subject line, and the preview text. The from, you mentioned just, using your name or something recognizable. I think that's fairly straightforward for people, right? I do know that people sometimes have questions if they have a company, especially if you're a solo entrepreneur or you're an entrepreneur with a smaller business. Should you use the company name? Should you use your name? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, you have to test it. So there's this thing in marketing, for those that are unfamiliar, called an A/B test. And it basically just means you're testing version A or variable A versus version or variable B. So what you basically do if you're running a subject line test, the contents of your email, the body text, the call to actions, what's actually in the email, those will stay the same. Like, those will be the same for each variation. The only thing that will change will be, the from name. And if you're doing a from name test, so the subject line will stay the same, the preview text will stay the same, because you want to isolate one variable at a time. Say you have two different from names, two different subject lines, two different preview texts. It's impossible to know like which one actually performed and for which reason. So for you, for example, yours could literally say from John, or it could say from John at podcast, whatever the podcast is, or from the podcast name, right? And you have to test those. Some people might not know you by your first name, and other people only know you by the name of your podcast. And then the inverse will be true. So you have to test that to be able to get some sense of like, and again, having statistical significance is important. If you have a small list, it's hard to get that statistical significance, but having something is better than nothing. But that's how I would approach it.
No, great insights there. And, when we think about, creating better copy, writing better headlines, writing better subject lines, writing better emails, can you give maybe one or two tips that could help someone do a better job of capturing that attention to get that engagement they're looking for?
Yeah, the very, very best tip I can give you is this. Go into your Gmail, go into your Outlook, go into your Microsoft 365, whatever you use, and literally click compose and write an email to one person on your list, right? So John, you're on my list. You're pretty, accurate in terms of who my list represents, right? Like, your persona fits my list. I'm going to queue up an email just like I'm writing to you, John. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that email, put it into my email provider, and send it to everyone. And obviously I'm going to personalize certain things. And the thing there is, psychologically, when we're in an email provider like MailChimp or ActiveCampaign or Klaviyo, we know that that's going to go to 100 people. We know that's going to go to 500 people, 1,000, 500,000. So we're in a different mindset of we're writing to a group. And when you write to a group, you're really writing for no one. Whereas if you go into the inbox provider, or sorry, your Gmail, your G Suite, and you write an email that's very personal just to you, John, and you take it and put it in there, I think that's going to read better and feel better. So the goal is, even though you're sending to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, writing in a way that's, first person, that each person on the receiving end feels like that's for them. That if there's a secret sauce, that's the secret sauce, is writing an active voice for a single person, and then making sure that that's applicable to a group.
Listen, Chase, great insights right there. If you want to learn more about what Chase's tips both on e-commerce and email marketing, he has a free newsletter that you should check out. It's available on his website, chasedimond.com, no A in diamond. And we will make sure we link to that in the show notes. If you scroll down the notes, you'll see the link there. But Chase, great insights right there on both e-commerce and email marketing. Let's move on to our bullseye round. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
That's a good question. I guess the first one, again, I've had a lot. I guess one that kind of comes to mind is I had a CBD business about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And I had like 6 business partners, right? And it's just a case of like way too many cooks in the kitchen, and everyone wants to call the shots and no one actually wants to do the work. So we had a really great business. We had a lot of great press. We had a lot of great traction. And then everyone wanted to be the shot caller. No one actually wanted to do the work. So just by having too many cooks in the kitchen and kind of it was something that myself and a partner came up with, and we just kind of freely throw equity out, like you get equity and you get equity and you get equity. And we didn't really hash out or iron out like who was going to be the ultimate decision maker, who was going to be doing which roles. It was kind of just something that we dove into because it was a side business for ours. We all had active businesses, and the level of commitment, the level of cash, the level of expertise for each person, varied greatly. So I think for me, just like not rushing into, giving out equity, not rushing into deals, and really being a little bit more thoughtful. And also too, like I like having less partners. I do like having partners. I don't think I'm someone that's probably going to ever start something by myself. I like to have someone else has complementary skill set. But having 6 other partners, there were 7 of us total, the cap table is messy, and it just wasn't great. So that's really set up a lot of the things I'm doing now and in the future, is like rather have 1 or 2 good partners than 6 mediocre partners.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Man, the amount of resources that you can find on Twitter and YouTube and things like that for free is insane. There's a lot of really smart people on Twitter that I find just through people that follow me or people that I follow who they follow. And again, because Twitter has great reach, there's just people that show up in my timeline I've never met before. Check their bio out. So for me, I'm really interested right now in learning about a couple things that Twitter has been great for. I'm really interested in learning more about, info products, right? So there's a great section on Twitter around people that are creating info products. Those are things like courses, ebooks, summits, whatnot. I'm in e-commerce, right? So e-commerce or direct to consumer, Twitter has a really great community of people saying like, hey, here's what I see that's working on Facebook, or, oh man, something is not happening or working well on Facebook or whatever today. And then lastly, I'm really interested, like this next stage I'm stepping into is like, how do I start angel investing and using kind of some of my audience to get into B2B deals, SaaS deals, Shopify apps, those types of things. So I'm learning a lot from people that are actively angel investing of the do's and the don'ts. So I don't have anyone in particular, but I think leveraging and finding the right community and the right pockets of people on Twitter, the right Slack groups, the right Facebook groups are extremely underrated.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I cannot sit down and actually read a book. Like I have so much stuff going on my computer screen. I've got a daughter that's 1 year old. I've got, I typically pick up basketball like 3 or 4 times a week. I can't get myself to just sit down and read a book. So I don't remember the last book I read, unfortunately.
All right, give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
So for me, with my 1-year-old daughter, I have like this very set schedule where from 7 a.m. till typically about 8:30 every morning. It's phones off. I'm hanging out with her, typically online from about 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then for about 2 hours after work, phones are off. I go on a walk with my wife and my daughter every single night. We make dinner, we put her to bed, and then I turn the phone back on. So for me, just turning the phone off was the only way I could get off of it and not be glued to it. So I typically turn it off, put it in a drawer, and then come back to it, when it's right.
What are you curious about right now?
So for me, I'll kind of mention that thing again around like, I've been obsessed with this concept of like B2B influencers. So in the B2C world in e-commerce, a lot of people are using influencers. And those are basically celebrities or just normal folks that happen to have followers. They could have 10,000 followers with a lot of impact. They could be a celebrity with 1 million followers, right? That is a really hot topic. That's something that's very prevalent within e-commerce. And I don't really see that something that a lot of people on the B2B side are doing. So for me, right, I own an agency with 100 clients. I've got a weekly newsletter with 11,000 people. I'm getting 4 million impressions a month on Twitter, right? I'm getting thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people consuming my content. So for a company to be able to partner with me and me partner with them, where I have skin in the game, where I have equity, and I have almost like a rev share, almost as like an affiliate, that's something to me that I'm really thinking about right now. I've been talking about that, where I don't want to just promote someone to my audience for $2,500. That's not that exciting. But if I could get someone that's like, hey, you own 1% right now, we'll give you advisory shares if you stick with us and give us advice over the next 2 or 3 years, right, on a vesting schedule. And if you also promote us, we'll give you guys an affiliate or rev share. That to me is really, really interesting. I see there's a lot of power there. And I'm surprised that more people aren't talking about that and aren't doing that.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
Oh man, I think the biggest thing, and like I'm obsessed with studying like the Navy SEALs, is like I wish growing up, and I wish even like not too long ago before I figured this stuff out over the last like 6 to 12 months, is like when our brains and our bodies tell us that we're tired, we actually have like an additional 30 to 40% of fuel left in the tank. That if I could just push a little bit harder, right? Just send that one more email, just run one more lap, just exert, a little bit more energy in that sprint. Like I just wish I knew that if I could just do a little bit more every single day, like how much compounding effect that would have.
Chase, we didn't ask this earlier, but where are you based?
So I'm in Orange County, California.
All right, Orange County, lots of great food options there. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Favorite place? There's this Italian spot in Irvine, California called North Italia. I think they have a chain. Amazing Italian food.
All right, awesome. Great tips there, or great restaurant there. Man, you've given us so much, man. I mean, we talk about email marketing. We talked about making sure we control the from line, the subject line, and then that preview section, which I know a lot of people don't even bother writing anything. So make sure you actually take advantage of the preview section. We also talked about how to get people to open your emails, what to look for from a metric standpoint, and then e-commerce, understanding that there's different ways to get into e-commerce, and how to look at marketing as a whole. So great tips throughout this entire conversation. Chase, I gave your website earlier, Chase Dimond, DIMOND.com. So if you want to connect with Chase, you're there. And then you're active on Twitter. We talked about Twitter. Is your handle Chase Dimond as well?
It's Ecom, so ECOM, and then Chase Dimond. Again, no A in Diamond. So Ecom Chase Dimond.
There you go. So we'll make sure we check you out there. We're connected, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing so many great insights with us. We look forward to staying in touch and checking out your podcast as well, and just really growing the relationship. But appreciate you today, and we hope you have a great one. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me.